In this video, we're going to look at the assembly environment in Solidworks. For that, I've modeled these three parts, and I want to assemble them in the way shown. The guide in red is rigid. The link in yellow can rotate about the pins, and the green cap is also rigid. So to do this, I've already modeled all of these parts. I'm just going to get straight into the assembly. So I'm going to go to File, New, Assembly. And for my ground, I'm going to start with the guide. I'm just going to drop this anywhere. Let me show my planes. Next, I want to insert my link. And because I have 3 links and 3 caps, I want to just make them once and pattern it across all of these pins. But to do that, I need to make sure that these pins were created with a pattern. So I can look in my guide drop down and see that they were in fact made with a pattern. So what I'm going to do is insert components here in the assembly tab and click on my link. I'm just going to drop it over here off to the side. And to get it where I want and have the relationships that I want as well, I'm going to use the mate feature. The mate feature is pretty straightforward. I first pick my mate selections, or you can start with the mate type. It depends on what you're trying to do, but really you can do either. I'm going to start with the inside and the outside of these cylinders, and it guessed that I wanted them to be concentric, which I do. So I'm going to accept. Now I can still move this up and down and rotate about that pin. So the next mate selection I want is to be between these two surfaces. And again, it guessed that I want them to be coincident, which I do. But I can hit accept, and I can still rotate this about that pin. So I'm going to leave it as is. I'm going to say, yep, I'm done with the mate feature, and grab my cap. For my cap, I'm going to go back into this mate feature and do the same thing. Grab these two surfaces, and they are coincident. Next, I want these two surfaces to be touching. And the last thing I want to do is make sure that that cap cannot rotate. So I'm also having my coincident. The last thing is that I want this plane and this surface to be parallel. So I'm going to hit parallel and grab these two surfaces. Now what I want to do is go to my pattern, and I don't want a linear component pattern. I want this drop down. I want a pattern that's driven by a component pattern. So the components that I want to pattern are the cap and the link, and the driving feature I want is this pattern here. I can click these directly, or I can go into this drop down here, go into the drop down of my guide and click on the pattern itself. Either way works. Sometimes it's just difficult to grab something right on the assembly, so we use this drop down. But these are exactly where I wanted them to be, so I'm going to hit accept. The next thing that I want to do is give this some color. It's a little confusing to see with everything being gray. So I'm going to go up here, and I can see this circle with the colors on it. This is how I edit the appearance. I can modify my color, so I'm going to start with this green color here and click on my 3 caps, all set with that green color. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the yellow links. And the same again with my red guide. Now that my assembly is complete and I can really tell the difference between those parts, there's a couple other things I wanted to show you. I also want to show you how to use the controls here. So I can use my middle mouse to scroll and zoom. I can click and drag with that middle mouse button to change the angle. And I can click and drag with that middle mouse button to pan. This is the same as viewing different parts. To move my components, I can click on them and drag. If for whatever reason I'm having any issues, I can come and click on Move Component and do it this way. Up here we have some more tabs to play with. This assembly tab, we've been through a lot of these. I can play with the layout or add a sketch or mark up. But I want to talk about the Evaluate tab, specifically this interference detection. So right now I can see that there's no interference. You may not be able to see it. This is why this interference detection tool is useful. So maybe there's a little bit of interference and I can't really tell. What I'm going to do is go to this interference detection, and right now I have link to selected, but I want to select the entire assembly and then hit calculate. And I get these errors. I can see that there's interference here and it's highlighted in red, and here as well. I can hit this drop down and see the two components that are interfering, and it just gives me some information about this. I'm going to hit OK, fix those parts, and try again. Again, I accidentally selected this link 3, so I'm going to delete it, select my whole assembly, and hit calculate. And I can see that there are no interferences. The last thing I want to show you before moving on is the exploded view. So I'm going to go back to assembly and click on my exploded view and start with my first step, my exploded step 1. I can rename this if I want. I'll say caps because that's what I'm going to choose. And as far as the features, I'm going to click all 3 caps and use this arrow to bring them up. That's all I wanted to do, so I'm going to hit done, but I can also change the angle or specify this distance. You have a lot of options with this feature that you can explore. The second step is for my links. And I'm going to select all 3 links, just like I did the caps, and bring them up as well. This is good, so I'm going to hit done and hit this check. Now, if I want to see this exploded view or edit it or collapse my features, I can go over here on the left into this menu and click here in my property manager. When I hit this drop down here, I can see exploded view 1. And by right clicking on it, I can choose to collapse or explode. There's a lot of different things that you can do with an assembly, and this was just a glimpse of some of the controls that we have.